I love literary analysis, and sometimes my way of engaging with that is to design characters from classic literature as animals. I promise it makes sense. I read Wuthering Heights for the first time this winter, and enjoyed it so much that I've lately been working out appropriate animal species and outfit designs for the major characters. For the sake of this video, we'll be focusing on the main four of the first generation: Cathy, Heathcliff, Edgar, and Isabella, which unfortunately leaves out my favorite guy, Hareton, but maybe we'll get to him later. In case you were planning on reading it, my discussion will contain spoilers for Wuthering Heights, mostly regarding Cathy or Isabella, but the book is almost 2 centuries old by this point. So without further ado, let's get into it. For my animal assignment scheme, I wanted to illustrate the clear distinction between the Earnshaw and Linton families, whose vastly different temperaments are also clear from their environments and names. The inhabitants of Wuthering Heights can be as fierce and wild as its weather. Earnshaw means Eaglewood, and Hindley and Hareton are both named for wild animals. But as much as I love a pun, I wasn't going to use those herbivorous options. The Earnshaws have bite to them. They're carnivores. Just look at Cathy. This is a woman who rips open pillows with her teeth. She can also feel quite predatory in the way she corners Isabella when Heathcliff pays a surprise visit to the Grange, and in the way she and Heathcliff gang up to mock Edgar's cowardice. For a specific type of carnivoran, I felt that Cathy's energy and mischief would fit well with some sort of mustelid, a member of the weasel family. I went with a European pine marten, cute and pretty in appearance, but a fierce hunter. I liked the idea of using an arboreal animal, since Cathy seems quite good at climbing, given her stunt busting Heathcliff out of the garret via the roof. And maybe there's something to the fact that Cathy's first appearance in the book, in Lockwood's Dream, is when a tree branch transforms into her hand. As for the outfit, I'll be designing 2 for every character in this video. One for their clothing in 1780, and the other for 1784, when a lot of dramatic events occur, to say the least. I ultimately plan on making more Wuthering Heights character lineups for other years, before and after these, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. It took me long enough to do these. I will say off the bat that I'm no expert on historical fashion, but I have had a lot of fun recently in looking through portraits from the 1770s to 1780s, and they've really been inspiring me to get designing. For Cathy's 1780 outfit, at the time when she's making an effort to dress well for Edgar's visits, she's wearing the classic red, which adaptations often use for her. I don't believe Cathy has ever mentioned wearing red anywhere in the book, which rarely describes clothing colors at all, but it makes sense to me why she should be portrayed that way. Cathy is fierce and fiery, full of passion. She likens herself and Heathcliff to fire, and Edgar in contrast to frost, and as we'll see, I dress Edgar in blue. But even beyond Cathy, the Earnshaws in general tend to be quite fierce and fiery in comparison with the Lintons. So along with animal species, I also use outfit color to distinguish the families in my designs. Hindley and Hareton, though not featured in this video, will also wear red much of the time. The color can change based on circumstances, though, and it certainly does near the end of Cathy's life, when she's explicitly described as wearing white. This gave me an opportunity to draw a chemise à la reine, which you see in a lot of 1780s portraiture, and I had so much fun with it. I've replaced the described shawl with exaggerated frills around the neck for the frazzled and haunted look they give. The chemise, with its white fabric and sash around the waist, looks not too different from the dresses in which children from this time period are often depicted, which gives a sense of Cathy reverting to childhood at the end of her life. And indeed, this is when she imagines that the last 7 years of her life never happened and she is still a child. The white and blue also give a ghostly look, for which I've slightly desaturated Cathy's fur to match, since after this point she'll be doing some serious haunting of our next character, Heathcliff. While Heathcliff's family origins are unknown, he is very much aligned with Wuthering Heights and the Earnshaw temperament, so I've also designed him as a carnivoran. It's true that the novel often associates him with dogs and wolves, but something feline seemed more fitting to me, as an obligate carnivore. He was a stray on the streets of Liverpool, and the superstition goes that cats see ghosts. Of course, ferocious Heathcliff had to be some sort of big cat. And for a particular species, I went with the leopard. They're known for being solitary and elusive, hiding in the trees like Heathcliff outside Thrushcross Grange. Leopards are mostly nocturnal, and Heathcliff has a propensity to stay out at night, to stand in Cathy's garden for 6 hours or dig up her grave or whatnot. On a serious note, I also wanted Heathcliff to be a species which isn't native to Britain or its European vicinity, unlike all the other characters, to indicate how his ethnicity differs from everyone else's. Leopards are found in South Asia and also have a much broader distribution, reflecting the uncertainty of Heathcliff's national origin. Wherever he's from, Heathcliff is frequently described as dark, so I used the leopard's melanistic color morph, which is also suggestive of prejudiced superstitions against black cats. And bearing in mind the Linton father's words about young Heathcliff's nature, there's also something speaking to prejudice and biblical associations of leopards, with the idea of changing one's spots. Can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? Heathcliff lamented in his teenage years that he could not, that he would never look like Edgar. And the differences between those two, whether innate or culturally attributed, are bound up in much of the novel's conflict. But whether or not Heathcliff can change his spots, he can change his clothes. The first drawing here represents Heathcliff in 1780, shortly before he leaves Wuthering Heights. Hindley is still forcing him to work as a farm servant, and he's falling deeper and deeper into degradation, as represented by his torn and patchy clothing. Heathcliff is still wearing some red here, matching with Cathy, but after leaving Wuthering Heights, he'll take on a look more his own. When Heathcliff returns years later, he's dressed like a perfect gentleman, so we have a clear change of outfit by 1784. He wears a coat and cravat, breeches instead of patchy trousers, and his waistcoat is buttoned. I like the idea of giving him prominent flaring lapels to expand his already imposing presence. He's still got a bit of red, which I imagine will disappear after Cathy's death, but he's primarily wearing black now, setting himself apart from the Earnshaws, and even more so from our next family, the Lintons. If the Earnshaws are wild carnivorans, then the residents of Thrushcross Grange must be domestic herbivores. The name Linton means flax town, speaking to settled agricultural life away from the wilds of Wuthering Heights. In contrast to the Brownford Earnshaws, I also wanted the Lintons to be animals with white or cream fur, since they're blonde and very white. This left a pretty obvious option for Edgar, and in fact Heathcliff explicitly refers to him as a lamb. He's often called soft, and the woolly fur of a sheep literalizes that. But Edgar is not just any sheep. He's a pampered rich kid, a purebred, so for a specific breed I went with a Border Leicester, developed in England in the 18th century. Honestly, very close to Edgar's birth year. As we'll see, the long years match my design for Isabella. Plus, Border Leicesters are known for a calm temperament, and the rams have no horns. They're also known for being good mothers, and Edgar is described as quite maternal in his care for the ailing Cathy, yes, the one he's married to, as well as being a doting parent to the other Cathy, his daughter. Edgar's wealth was also an excuse for me to give him a fancy outfit, big decorated buttons and all. If the Earnshaw color is a burning red, it seemed to me that the Linton color should be a calm pale blue. They're always described as having big blue eyes. The white, gold, and blue color scheme, as well as the biblical symbolism of sheep, also lends to Edgar's association with heaven, as in what is socially expected of Cathy that she doesn't truly want. While Edgar and Isabella are living together at the Grange and being pampered by their parents, I wanted them to have matching outfits, which is reflected in the color scheme, but also in me giving them a lot of bows. The ones in Edgar's hair and cravat were apparently not enough for me, so I also put some on his shoes in the style of Thomas Gainsborough's Blue Boy. Eventually, however, Edgar and Isabella's paths in life diverge, as do their outfits. In 1784, Edgar is refusing to visit poor Isabella and won't be seeing her again for 13 years. So as the siblings grow apart, they lose their matching clothes. Edgar will also decide to eschew the chapel monument where his family is interred in favor of being buried with Cathy on the heath, transitioning to something new. So what we have in 1784 is an intermediate stage as Edgar is leaving behind the blue but hasn't yet adopted a new color, with his wife being on death's door. Not to say he never wears a coat during this time, but this is a stressful point in his life, so the state of undress reflects that. He's no longer dressing up to go visit Wuthering Heights or fulfill his duties as magistrate, and for some time after Cathy's death becomes a hermit. But if Edgar is confining himself to Thrushcross Grange, his sister is having a very different experience. I preferred not to use the same species for both Linton siblings, but I still wanted to show a clear resemblance between them, at least in features like nose and ears. Some inspiration was provided by Cathy's characterization of Edgar as a sucking leveret, as lagomorphs seemed another good option for timid herbivores. And they're more befitting Isabella than Edgar, since the woman can run. She made it across 4 miles of snowy moorland in her slippers. Like Edgar, Isabella is a purebred, so I based her design on an English spot rabbit, which are a running breed, and are of course English. They're typically kept as pets, with which Isabella is much associated. Her little dog, her pheasant, a canary. But unfortunately, Wuthering Heights is no place for pets. However, Isabella proves to be very resilient in spite of her pampered upbringing, so maybe she's got something of the wild rabbit in her. European rabbits are quite adaptable and can inhabit a range of habitats, even urban areas, just as Isabella eventually moves across the country to London to live out the rest of her life. As with Edgar, I wanted Isabella's 1780 outfit to be something cute and fancy, full of bows. Portraits from the time period provided lots of inspiration, and also suggested to me how fun it would be for little Isabella to have a huge hat, which would fit nicely with her long rabbit ears. Now, based on the book and Isabella's young age, her usual dress is presumably simpler than this, but I wanted some fancy flair. Perhaps this is her dressing up to go visit the Earnshaws. Not much description is provided of her typical clothing, but Nellie mentions her usually wearing a girlish dress, and that's what she's wearing at the time of escaping Wuthering Heights, depicted here. Usually it might have some accompaniment, like lacy frills on the sleeves or a sash around the waist, but her miserable living situation at the Heights hardly permits such shows. Her hair is uncurled, her dress seldom changed. The blue is faded from what it once was, and the fabric is torn and covered in dirt after Isabella's 4-mile run through the moors. She's also got a serious cut in her ear from Heathcliff, throwing a knife at her head. But she'll never have to see him again. I will note, I had already given Heathcliff's design a ripped ear as a result of his time as a homeless orphan and of Hindley's abuse, but it may be becoming a pattern, something Heathcliff later inflicts on others. We've got it here with Isabella, and I also intend to incorporate it into future designs. Heathcliff will probably rip up Hindley's ear after the latter is knocked unconscious, and Cathy Jr.'s when forcibly keeping her at Wuthering Heights. I think it could be an interesting way to show how Heathcliff inflicts his past trauma on others once he reaches a position of power. Well, that's about it from me. There's certainly more that could be said of these characters, but perhaps I'll get back to them later, or to their parallel characters in the second generation. It's been fun. Thank you for watching.